So that injury, that was one of the most psychologically harrowing experiences of my career, is just figuring out how to navigate that space, how to eventually see it as a superpower, how to eventually, if I hadn't gotten that injury, I wouldn't have been able to rebuild my body in a way that allowed me to come back from that injury like a completely different athlete. And I think because of all the work I had to do in the gym to address things I had never addressed my entire career, coming off of that, I really think almost gave me longevity and probably gave me a couple more years, especially in the marathon.
Welcome to the Injured Athletes Club podcast, the show that helps athletes cope with sports injuries and bounce back stronger. I'm mental skills coach Carrie Jackson. We're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us.
And I'm journalist Cindy Kuzma. We are so thrilled to be back with you for season 9 of the Injured Athletes Club.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we missed you all so much, and we are so excited to start things off with a fantastic guest. Our guest this week is Laura Thweatt, a retired professional marathoner who's now a coach with the On Athletics Club in Boulder. She has significant experience both in navigating injury herself and in guiding other athletes through it now as a coach. But before we get to that, we wanted to remind you about some of the other resources we have here for you.
One of those key resources we want to make sure we share with you is especially wonderful because there's a bunch of resources there. It's buymeacoffee.com/rebound. If you head over there, we have all kinds of incredible resources for injured athletes, both free and everything that you buy there. All of those proceeds go to supporting our work with injured athletes and supporting the podcast. And in particular, you might want to head over there and check out our latest recording of our webinar on nutrition. It was incredible. We had an amazing panelist. So it was the Injured Athletes Club webinar, the latest insights on sports nutrition and injury. So you can check that out and grab that if you're wondering, how do you approach nutrition when you're injured, and check out all the other resources we have there for you as well.
Excellent. We also want to give a great big thank you once again to our exclusive sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. They are the creators of the Lever System, a portable, lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. You'll hear more about Lever again later in the episode, but spoiler alert, you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device at levermovement.com. With all that out of the way, let's get on to this week's show, first episode of season 9. Hooray! Like I mentioned, our guest is Laura Thweatt. She is a recently retired professional runner. In fact, she ran for Saucony for more than a decade and has a marathon personal best of 2 hours and 25 minutes. That is pretty dang fast. In fact, she finished 5th in the Olympic marathon trials in 2020. And during her career, she earned 3 U.S. cross-country titles and made 5 U.S. teams. Now she's a coach for the On Athletics Club in Boulder, where she guides the training of athletes like New York City Marathon champion Helen Obiri. And she's also done a lot of podcasting herself as part of the team behind the Relay Running podcast. So it wasn't any surprise to me, given her podcasting background and also knowing Laura through her years as an athlete, that she had so many amazing insights to share. Carrie, I am extra excited to have this as our first episode of the season because I know we have a lot of runners out there, and I know anyone from any sport can relate to some of what Laura has been through. She really learned a lot along her journey. And there's a moment at the end that almost made me tear up where she really, I don't want to give it away. I've already given one spoiler alert in this intro already, but she has this moment of clarity where, she realizes if she could have seen what the future was like back when she was struggling with injuries or back when she was retiring from the sport, she would have been so relieved and so grateful for everything that she'd been through. So I just, I think that this is going to speak to anyone who is in a tough spot right now or has been in a tough spot and give them a little bit of hope.
Yeah, I am very excited that we are kicking off the season with Laura. This was an incredible interview, and I think you guys will really resonate with everything she talks about around the challenges of staying patient through the process and how hard that is. And also when she speaks about how she learned how to advocate for herself and speak up for herself through multiple parts of her athletic career. I think you'll really resonate with that as well. And I loved me personally, right? I mean, there was a lot I loved about this, but I really appreciated how she was talking about finding a win out of every single day. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode. And we're so excited to kick off season 9 with Laura.
Right. As you all know, Winning Wednesday, we have in our Facebook group, the Injured Athletes Club, every week, such an important and huge strategy. So here you'll get to hear how Laura implemented that for herself. Here's our interview. Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on the Injured Athletes Club.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be great.
Yeah. So we have a saying around here, which is, we're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us. Because we know that injury and illness and all of those things can be a roller coaster with lots of ups and downs along the way. And we know you're in a different phase of your athletic career now, which we'll talk about today. But we always just ask this question at the beginning of every episode. Laura, how are you doing today?
Today, I'm doing great. I'm healthy. I am exploring a new chapter of my professional career. I won a turkey trot over the Thanksgiving weekend.
Nice.
So I still got it. So you know what? I'm doing pretty good today.
That's awesome.
Excellent. Love to hear it. Love to hear it. So yeah, we're going to get into more of your coaching and all of that. But first, you had an incredibly long pro running career, a whole decade with a lot of accomplishments along the way. Yet I've heard you also kind of describe yourself as an injury prone runner. And I kind of think that that's going to be reassuring and relatable to a lot of our listeners to know that you can have both a lot of setbacks and a lot of achievements. So I'm curious, given your lengthy career as an athlete and now as a coach, do you really think that some athletes are injury prone, that they just do have to be more cautious when it comes to staying healthy? And if so, what factors do you think kind of go into that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, I said this as an athlete and now I say it on the other side of things. I think everyone's different. And I think there's 1,000 different ways to train. And it's really easy, especially now in this day and age with social media and Strava and, all of these platforms where you can see day by day what everyone is doing, what your competitors are doing, what, people you look up to are doing, whatever the case may be. So it's really easy to kind of hone in on this one thing and be like, this is what I have to do to be great. And I have to do it like identically to whoever is doing it that I'm looking at. But that's not the case. And so I think it's really easy. A lot of us in our own ways get sucked into that and start to think that if I can't train this way, if I can't run 120 miles a week, then I just can't run the marathon, or I just can't do whatever it is I'm training to do because I can't stay healthy. So I think like halfway through my career, after being pretty injury prone in college, sort of figuring that out, and then having a similar kind of pattern reemerge in my early professional career, I started to realize that, it's looking at it as far as like, what do I need to do individually to stay healthy? And what does my training need to look like? And figuring that out is kind of like your own superpower, because once you figure out what keeps you healthy, what gives you confidence, what makes you feel really strong, then that's how you have success. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. But I think that's why so many of us maybe fight the injury battle, or it's a piece of why so many of us fight the injury battle, is we're comparing and kind of we have it in our head that in order to do whatever event we're training for, or to run whatever PR we want to run, or to achieve these goals we've set for ourselves, it has to look a certain way.
That's right.
And if we get hurt, or if setbacks happen as we're trying to do it the way we think we have to do it, or the way a coach is maybe telling you that you have to do it, but it's just not working, and then there's this pattern emerging and you're getting that information that it's not working, it's okay to take that step back, reset, and be like, okay, what does need to change? But I think that's why so many of us probably fight that battle, is we kind of get locked in, like, I have to train this way.
Strava. Like the
Strava.
bane of
Same. I always joke, I've never had a Strava. I've been dark my entire career, but I think that was like a piece of it, is like, I know there's privacy settings and there's all these things you can do to obviously keep it more to yourself. But one, I didn't want my training just out there. And then two, it's like, just being on there and seeing what everyone is doing,
right.
I think is a blessing and a curse, right? Like you have to, these platforms, I think, can be really empowering, but there's boundaries to them, and you have to be able to put the blinders on when you need to do that.
Yeah. Like, and put it in its place, right? And to be able to use it for the benefits that it gives, but not be
totally
not take on the
get
detriments.
Like so consumed and being like, this is what it has to look like.
Yes. Or worry that, but to your point, like, I think that's so important that you have to. So one of the things I say, like, to my clients is, in their injury recovery is you have to honor what the body needs over what the mind wants. And same with
so hard.
Right. It's very hard, right? But same here where it's like, it doesn't matter what anyone else's training plan is. Like you have to figure out what works for this body in this moment in time. And that comparison trap that we fall into, that people fall into, or just that like, I'm sticking to my plan, but then all of a sudden I see on Strava, someone just beat me. Well, there goes the plan. And guess what I'm doing today? I'm going to go out there and do that. Like, what are you guys? No, don't. So I love, and I really love this question about, I feel like we could do a whole episode on that label of injury prone and like the different ways people take that on and how sometimes it could be beneficial and how sometimes it's detrimental. And so I love that we're just talking about this topic in particular.
Totally. Me too.
Yeah. So it sounds like, because that was sort of my next question for you, is how you think that impacted you. And you kind of got to this a little bit in that first answer. Like, did that cause you anxiety because you thought, oh, I'm injury prone? Or it sounds like you were able to make that transition and be like, oh, okay, well, this reminded you that you had to look at things a little bit differently and view things through the lens of what's right for you. So yeah, what did like having that label or like saying that about yourself, what impact do you think that it had for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in college, that's when I first really started to kind of fall in that cycle with injury, because I was just, you're making that huge transition from high school to college, or at least for me, it was a pretty big transition. You're adapting and adjusting to so many things outside of even just the training piece and the running piece of it. And so I started to kind of fall in this injury cycle. And it's really hard because when you're injured, you're not able to do what everyone else is doing. You kind of feel like you're like everyone's like kind of over here and then you're way off in the corner by yourself. And, especially in the collegiate system with, 40 people on a team, it's really hard to like get that one-on-one attention from your coach or that individual kind of check in when you're injured and you just can't do what everyone else is doing. And you're kind of just like trying to figure out how to get yourself healthy and get back to it. So I think when I was younger, that was really hard because you just felt like you weren't part of the team when you were injured. And then it was frustrating because I would get healthy. I'd feel really good. You think you kind of like have it behind you. And then I would get hurt again with a very similar injury. And so it's really hard. And you're kind of like, why isn't this working for me? Like, everyone else seemingly is staying healthy, and I just can't quite put like a whole season together, or I can't put a whole year together without something happening. And then I'm injured again. And then I'm cross training and then I'm by myself or I'm on the Alter G and I'm just kind of like this separate piece. So that was I really struggled with that. And so I think it was around my junior year, I finally sat down with my coach and I was like, listen, like, I'm really frustrated. I can't seem to stay healthy, but I get glimpses of what I can do when I am healthy. And I think the training can work for me, but I think I need to do less volume or supplement that volume with like an Alter G. And so that's kind of what we started doing like the last 2 years of my career. And that was working a lot better. And every time you get injured, you learn something about yourself and what maybe didn't work. Maybe you're not putting that all together off of the first injury or whatever the case may be, but you're learning kind of like this works, this doesn't, this is when and like you're learning the signs of injury so you can catch it a lot earlier. Because I think in college, you could start to feel something wasn't right, but you don't want to tell your coach you're hurt and you don't want to sit out again. You don't want to, again, like be away from the team. You want to do what everyone else is doing. So I just wouldn't communicate about what I was feeling. And then that leads to just more catastrophic injuries that take longer to heal from. Mm-hmm. So that was part of my journey too, is like realizing that it's okay to communicate if something hurts or something doesn't feel right, because you do start to learn your body really well. And you can prevent or stop it much earlier and have a much quicker recovery time if you can learn to do that. So I guess that's kind of what I learned in college, is communicating the injury piece of it and trying to get ahead of a bigger injury and then tweaking things slowly in like that system to try and be a little bit more healthy and do things a little bit different than everyone else was doing them. And then I took that into my professional career, but again, different environment, different setbacks, having a whole nother thing to learn. But to answer your question, yeah, being injured is really hard, whatever level you're at, however old you are, however many injuries you've had, it's never easy to have something to have a setback that you're having to deal with that takes you away from something that you really like to do. That's always going to be really hard, no matter how you spin it.
Yeah, Yeah, so true, so true. And that's, the reason that we started this work in the first place, because we had both experienced that, not to, neither of us were professional athletes, obviously, but knowing that everyone goes through that experience, and it's both so isolating, as you say, but also so common and normal and part of an athletic journey, that talking about it is really beneficial, I think. And you kind of highlighted something that I wanted to ask you too, because even just looking at your professional career, we talk a lot here about how the experience of injury can be different from athlete to athlete and injury to injury. And I feel like you had the opportunity to see so many different kinds of scenarios, kind of a longer term injury that kept you out of the sport for months, an injury that cropped up later and led you to drop out of a race, a injury that developed early and you had a shortened training cycle, but you still had a good race. And then last year you had that injury that had you pulling out of Chicago days beforehand, the Chicago Marathon days beforehand. So you just have had so many sort of different scenarios and outcomes. And it'd be great to talk through at least a few of those experiences more in depth, but big picture, like when you think back about your injury history, is there like kind of one of those situations that stands out to you as the most difficult psychologically? And if so, what do you think factors into that?
Yeah, I'd say, the hardest one that I experienced as an athlete was osteitis pubis, which is like inflammation of the pubic symphysis in the pelvis. I ran through that for a really long time before I finally decided to address it, or I guess I didn't decide to address it. I was forced to address it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't race for over a year. Like I was out of competition for almost 12 months and I couldn't run a step for 6 months. So that was incredibly challenging, especially as a professional athlete where like you literally cannot do your job. And so it was really, really stressful from not only a financial standpoint and like my contract with Saucony and what I'm obligated to do for them, and myself being, again, having this as my career. But as I touched on earlier, it's really hard in this sport to be injured and to be sidelined for any amount of time, but for that amount of time, because there's really no off season with running. Like it is year round when you feel like you're on the sideline for that amount of time and you can't train, you can't put races on the calendar, but you're watching, the sport go on without you. That's what it feels like. Like you're watching people just go on, run these fast times, continue to like win and do all these cool races and train and, and move and just go on with their life. Like when you're injured, or at least when I was dealing with that injury, I felt like my world stopped and I was just like standing still. Mm. And so psychologically, that's really hard on top of the physical aspect of I had to essentially rebuild my body. And I had to be really patient with that process because it obviously wasn't an overnight. I wasn't out for like 6 weeks. Like, again, I couldn't run a step for 6 months. So you're doing a ton of cross training and then you're in the gym every single day and you're just trying to get your body back to a point where you can run. Like my first run back was like 1 minute of running, 10 minutes of walking, like 3 times. So I really had to just start. It felt like I was starting over. So that injury, that was one of the most psychologically harrowing experiences of my career, is just figuring out how to navigate that space, how to eventually see it as a superpower, how to eventually, if I hadn't gotten that injury, I wouldn't have been able to rebuild my body in a way that allowed me to come back from that injury like a completely different athlete.
Yep.
And I think because of all the work I had to do in the gym to address things I had never addressed my entire career, coming off of that, I really think almost gave me longevity and probably gave me a couple more years, especially in the marathon. But again, you don't see that when you're in it.
Right.
But it's surrounding yourself with people that can see outside of where you are and that can give you that perspective, and can give you that support. I mean, that's the thing when you're recovering from any type of injury or setback, it's also the community that you have around you that gets you through that. You don't have to do it by yourself. And frankly, I don't know that you can do it by yourself. Right. So that was also something that I learned, is lean on the people that the team that you built for yourself, lean on those people. So that one definitely challenged me the most. But I learned so much from it. And I truly do think I was a different athlete coming off of it. Did all the right things to get healthy and to stay healthy. Because with that injury, I think the hardest thing for people is realizing that the process, the timeline, that it takes to really not only like get healthy, but then to make sure that you don't get re-injured or that it doesn't come back.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And luckily for me, I had like little symptoms here and there over the years, but it never came back in that way. And so again, it's just being able to give yourself that time to rebuild when you need to, but that's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting too, because I think there are phases of it when you're talking about an injury like that, where you really do need to rebuild in order to get to optimal performance, like recognizing, oh, wait a minute, that foundation wasn't there in the first place. And now it can be, but that is its own part of the recovery. So that, I'm curious to know, because the whole idea of staying patient is something that a lot of our injured athletes struggle with. So especially
it's like the hardest part.
Right, exactly. So I would love for you to share, like, if you remember any moments where you were like, man, I was really struggling with patience at this moment. Because I always tell my athletes, like, you never come back as quick as you want because you don't want to be injured in the first place. But when you do have like a 12-month recovery, that is a long period of time. It's very normal to struggle with losing patience. So what did you do for yourself in those moments where you could feel like, I'm still on this journey and I'm struggling with being patient with the journey? How did you get through those moments?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think I was lucky that I had really great people who were helping me with that. And one of my really good friends who was my practitioner at the time and who I saw like throughout the entirety of my career. But this injury is kind of how we first started working together. So again, another like amazing thing that came from this. But one day, like I was seeing him for treatment and I was just so frustrated. I was like 3 months in. I'd finally gotten the green light to like cross train. Like for like almost 2 months, I couldn't do like anything at all. I had to just let it heal and like let it kind of catch up enough where I could start to kind of stress it and like the most, like get in the pool. So I like just started cross training. I was like 3 months in. I was like, doing very baby stuff in the gym because again, I had so much pain still doing so many movements. So like I was guided by, I can do what doesn't give me pain or what doesn't give me soreness within 24 hours. But anything that does, I'm not ready to do yet. So you're really just letting your body literally tell you day by day, like what it's ready to do and like what it's not. So like the progress felt really slow to me. And I was just like so incredibly frustrated. And so he told me to start writing down, like almost keeping like a training log essentially. But he challenged me to find a win out of every single day. And like write down like, what was really positive. And then, I could write down my frustrations, but like really just charting kind of like, again, challenged me to find that perspective of like, yeah, this sucks. And when you're looking at the whole, it feels like you're never going to get there. But if you break it down, like you do in a marathon, like you're running like literally the mile you're in. If you break it down in the same way where it's like, okay, today I was able to cross train in the pool for 20 minutes. That's a huge win. I was pain free after. Or today in the gym, I was able to do like a really tiny baby lateral movement and I didn't have like any pain, like that's a huge win. And so then after like a month, you look back on everything you've charted and you can actually see the progress that you're making. Whereas like day in and day out, when you're just kind of like, you feel like you're just doing the same thing and you're kind of stuck and you feel like you're just so far away from like the big end goal of being back running. This was really helpful for me. So that was one of the things that I found really useful, like just like you would like a training journal. That's essentially what it was, but it was like my injury journal where I was challenged to kind of find that perspective, but then I could also use it to like be frustrated because that's what my sports psych always told me. She was like, you don't have to pretend that like you're fine. Like, obviously you're not fine. Like this sucks and it's your career and there's a lot of question marks. And, some people don't fully recover from this injury. Like you're allowed to be like upset or sad or frustrated or angry or all of those emotions aren't bad, but like, don't get stuck there. So like feel what you're feeling on a day and like give yourself a period of time to feel that just like you do after a bad race. But then how do you move through it and like move on to the next day? And so writing down the wins from each day, even if they were really small, was like a really helpful way for me to like move through all the other emotions that like come with just dealing with something like that.
That's so great. I think that echoes a lot of advice that Coach Carrie always gives people. And I think it really does shift your focus from the distance between where you are and where you want to be to like the actual distance that you've come, right? In your recovery.
Yes.
So,
Charting your own progress. But yeah, realizing, it's not going to just like happen. Like it is going to be, it's going to take time. But that was just like, that was really helpful. And like, I felt once I started doing that, I was able to kind of just have more positive days, as opposed to just being stuck and like, this sucks.
Can you share just a little bit too about, because I think osteitis pubis is, first of all, it sounds incredibly painful and terrible. And I think it is more common than we know. Can you just share like a little bit about what it is and what it felt like and how I think it also took you a little while to get the diagnosis, right? So just share a little bit about that piece of the journey too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I had never heard of it before I was diagnosed. I started having like 2 years probably before it like really blew up and stopped me completely. I started to have, it's like kind of like an achy groin pain. And I noticed it one day. I was doing like a side plank and I was like lifting my leg, and all of a sudden I just had this like really deep, like sharp achy pain through like my groin and like my like high adductors. And I was like, that's so weird. I don't know what that is. So I really didn't start noticing it. I don't like the first little bit, I only started noticing it like in lateral movements, or if I was like, doing like some plyos where you're moving side to side or anything like that. And then as it started to progress, I started to notice like an achy pain, like an achy groin pain after like a long run or like a double, as like your body's obviously fatiguing. And again, like my glutes weren't really firing. My hamstrings were really weak. My adductors were really weak. Like my abdominal, like my lower core was really weak. So like, all of these areas around the pelvis that are supposed to kind of help stabilize, like obviously weren't doing their job. And so I was feeling it after like a long run or like a really high volume marathon session or a double where like your body's fatiguing. And again, it was just like that achy groin pain, but it would kind of go away like after 24 hours or so. I wouldn't really notice it. I could go do the next thing. I was moving through training. And then it slowly started being more where it was like 2 days, I would feel it. Like 3 days after a long run, I would feel it. Or it was getting to the point where it was like interrupting daily life. So like I couldn't sleep on my side or like roll over in bed was becoming really painful. I couldn't like put jeans on. Like I couldn't stand on one leg without having like that sharp pain. Driving in my car for like long periods of time and like getting out like was also starting to get really painful. So it started to just like interrupt way too much of life. So that's when I finally started to like question like what's going on. And then I got the diagnosis like 3 months before I was supposed to do the London Marathon. The smart move would have been to not do London. But my coach and I at the time decided that like we were kind of like already in the middle of this build. There were things I could do to manage it. We could kind of move training around to make sure I had that recovery time. I could get through London and then we could like really address the issue. So I did that. It was incredibly painful though. Like by the end of my London build, I could like long runs, anything over like an hour, I would just have that deep achy pain for just like days on end. It just wasn't going away. So I got through London, like basically off of like really heavy anti-inflammatories that like just like numbed the area. Somehow ran my PR.
I was going to say that was your personal best time.
It was my best. Yeah. It was my best race, which is like shocking. And again, like would not recommend. Like that was not the smart thing to do because I pushed and pushed and pushed even after we knew kind of what I was dealing with and the severity of OP. We kind of just kept pushing that envelope because I was still able to kind of manage it. And like, that's the thing with an injury like that is you can manage it until you can't. Okay. And so after London, I could hardly walk. They had to like wheel me off of the finish line in like a wheelchair. I like couldn't walk for like a week. I was in so much pain. I couldn't sleep. And so I finally went in and saw a doctor here in Boulder. I tried to do a PRP shot because I had made the world championship team with like my London time. So again, we're like, what if we just push like 3 or 4 more months, which I think is like what so many of us think we can do is it's like you get these injuries. It's not like a broken bone. So you're kind of like, it's a tendon thing. It's just this inflammation of this like pubic symphysis, like at the top of your pelvis. Like we can keep managing it. Like we got away with it once. We can probably get away with it again. But it was just like so bad. And the doctor was like, you 100% like cannot, like you have to shut everything down. So yeah, it was not only like my longest recovery period for an injury, but it was definitely one of the most painful that I've ever had. And again, it just interrupted my daily life. In addition to running, it was just all the time. I was just living with that pain. And I think sometimes as runners, like that's a problem too, is like we all have really high pain tolerances.
Right. Yeah.
And you kind of, again, like you're like, oh, I'm managing it, or like it's just tendonitis, or it's this or that. And you just keep making excuses for it, when the smart thing to do is just stop.
Yeah.
And actually like address what the issue is, and not think we can just keep pushing like one more race or one more long run or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did that for a long time with this injury, which is why mine was so bad. And why I had to, not race for over a year. So I definitely paid the price of that, but I learned from that. That's like older me stopped doing things like that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big struggle with a lot, especially my endurance athlete. Well, I would say all my athletes, but especially my endurance athletes, where it's like you're very much trained to tune out your body's pain signals, right? That's almost like part of your job as an athlete. And then when you try and apply that same template to injury, it doesn't work. Like you can't. No. And so like I always say, we know you can push through the pain. You're an athlete. We know you can push through the pain. Right now, a sign of your mental toughness is not whether or not you can push through the pain. It's whether or not you can hold back. And as soon as I say that, all my athletes are like, oh, because it's like, yep, that's exactly what.
Again, being harder. Patient. Yeah. Again, like pumping the brakes is so hard, and we're just not wired to do that.
Yeah.
And we think we've like failed, or like, we're not tough enough, or, like we're almost to the end goal. It'll be fine. But in reality, again, like you're just going to pay that consequence like later down the road, when it's going to be a lot higher of a price.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for being transparent about all that too. I think I still remember there's a physical therapist in New York, Colleen Bruff, that we've talked to a lot before. And I feel like she has this attitude where she never tells an athlete, you must, unless it's, a stress fracture where it's like, if you continue running, you're going to break your bone. But like in cases like this, it's like what she tries to do is give athletes the information. Like, you can continue to run with this, but this is what's going to happen. And you have to be prepared for a longer recovery on the other side. And, if you're a professional, or if you have other goals, everyone is in a different place with that. And, she's like not judging what's right or wrong, but it's like, I appreciate you sharing like all the factors that went into your decisions, and then how that shaped what came after, it's like always pros and cons with
always
all those things. Yeah. Well, I know you did eventually come back from that injury, and you came back the next year and won the Shamrock Shuffle here in Chicago, which is a great race. Love it. But then, you were going to come back to Chicago in the fall for your comeback, and that didn't exactly go as planned, which was a whole different scenario. So I wondered if you could talk about that too, and that idea of like going through all that, coming back, feeling like you had addressed so many of the root causes of injury, but then having something different pop up.
Yeah, that was like a different heartbreak for sure. I wanted to come, I'd been sidelined with this injury for an entire year, and I really wanted Chicago to like be my comeback. And that's kind of what we had built like everything towards once I was fully healthy and like back into training. And so when I had to drop out of Chicago, I went in with an Achilles injury that I had sustained probably, 2 months before. We were training really hard. We were doing some different type of training that even in the moment, I was like, I don't know that this feels right. But again, like this is a different part of my journey in learning how to communicate and stand up for myself and trust what I'm feeling. This was an instance where I knew something wasn't quite right. We were doing different types of long runs and trail runs and all this kind of, I would classify it as crazier stuff now for the Chicago Marathon, coming off of this really horrific injury. And so then I started to get Achilles pain, and it was like a bursa, but it's really incredibly painful. It's like my tendon was fine, but I had this inflamed bursa sac like right on the Achilles tendon. And it was just so incredibly painful. And it flared up maybe like 6 weeks before Chicago. So like you're in the build, you're trying to manage it. You're doing cross training. You're trying to run on the Ultra G. You're trying to do these things to just get yourself to the line. And after everything I had done with London, at that point, I hadn't learned from that experience fully. I was like, I got away with London. So I'll just get away with Chicago. It's fine. And it's a less severe injury. It's not, my pelvis essentially breaking. It's just like this bursa sac, So I did Shockwave like right before I went to Chicago, like the week of. Got to Chicago, could like not do my shakeout, was like limping, but I was just like convinced that I could do this race, putting so much emotional pressure on it because I was like, this is my comeback race. And like, again, like I was young in my career. I felt like I had committed to the race directors. I felt like I couldn't pull out like 3 days before. I felt like I had to start. I had to know that I couldn't do it almost, even though I knew that I couldn't do it. And unfortunately, I didn't really have the right support team at that point to tell me that it's okay to not do it. And so I did it and I dropped out at mile 10 because I was limping and like running on one leg. So again, that was just like another learning experience, but it was so frustrating because you're like, what is not working? Like, why does this keep happening? And so it was after Chicago in 2018 that I made some big changes. And I finally felt empowered enough to stand up for myself and be like, this situation that once worked really well, and I had a great run, it's not working anymore because there's no ability to change things that obviously need to be changed for where I am as an athlete now. I can't train the same way that I was training before. I'm stronger from this injury, but like, it's clear that I need to do it differently. And this just isn't the situation or the environment where I can do that. So I made a big coaching change. I joined Team Boss, started working with Joe Bossard. That was the turning point for me, I feel like, as far as realizing that I could train differently and be successful, because I finally started working with a coach who acknowledged that, was young in his career, was a student of the sport, and was like, all right, I think you can be a great marathoner. The problem is you're not getting to the start line healthy. If you can't get to the start line healthy, it doesn't matter what your capability is. It doesn't matter what your potential is. It doesn't matter what you did in your training block if you can't actually do the race at that level. So he was like, the point, like, the thing for you is, how do we get you to the start line healthy, feeling confident and strong? And like, maybe we just have to do it differently. And it's not running 115 miles a week, because you clearly can't do that. And so he was the first person that really like gave me that permission of like, we're going to do it differently, but you're going to be really successful doing it differently because you can't keep doing it the way you're doing it. And he finally was like this outside person being like, we're going to change things up. So that's where that shift really happened. And then I came back to Chicago in 2019, having dealt with like a stress fracture like 14 weeks before that one. But Joe was really great. We did a ton of cross training. I really was only running on like my long runs and like workout days. So maybe 2 to 3 days a week, all my doubles, 1 full day completely in the pool. And I had a great race and qualified for the Olympic trials with the A standard and went into 2020. So that was it was a longer comeback, but I finally had my comeback at Chicago. It was just 2 years later, after learning all of this from the injuries I had. Those eventually empowered me to make a change that I needed to make. I made the change, and then things really started to like turn for me. So it was all like a blessing in disguise. But again, in the moment of those things, it was heartbreaking. And just like, you know, you just ask yourself, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why isn't this working? Like, this can't be where I keep ending up. But then it was like, okay, that's true. Well, what are you going to do about it though?
Can you run more mileage without getting hurt? Return to running sooner after an injury.
Keep your fitness even when you're facing a setback? Or get to the start line healthy and faster? If you ask our friends at Lever Movement, you just might find the answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. We are thrilled to welcome Lever Movement back as our sponsor for season 9 of the Injured Athletes Club podcast. And if all that sounds good, they have an offer that makes it easier than ever for you to try the Lever system for yourself. In case you haven't heard about it yet, the Lever system is a portable, lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. This is very good news for all of us athletes because it means less impact on the joints, so we can come back from injury safely or even prevent getting hurt in the first place. And the best part is that it's portable. That means you can use it at home or even take it to the gym and set it up in less than 2 minutes.
Elite athletes like marathoner Sarah Hall and Jess Lehrmanth, an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, have used Lever in their training and rehab routines. And we know, so have many of you in the Injured Athletes Club. If you'd like to check out the Lever system for yourself, use the discount code INJURED20 to get 20% off any device. And stay tuned here on the podcast and in the Facebook group for the Injured Athletes Club this season. We'll have more exciting updates from our partnership. We have some fun plans in the works with Lever we know you're going to want to check out. One thing I've heard you talk a lot before is about having to rebuild confidence each time you face an injury or a setback like that. And I can hear that shift and that turning point then, and like having someone else to like instill you with that confidence too. But like, how did you work on that yourself each time? Because that is like another big challenge, right?
Yeah, that's really hard because every time you're sidelined, and like this is a problem when you're in an injury cycle, is every time you're sidelined, you are losing that consistency. You're losing that foundation, and you're having to kind of rebuild that every single time. And it's taking away from being able to keep just building off of things. And so athletes that can stay healthy, like they are able to keep putting, like stacking like season after season or year after year. And like, especially as you go up in distance with the marathon, that's huge. The athletes that can do that. And I couldn't do that. And so, you're like having to take 6 weeks to 6 months off, rebuild, get back up. And like, you just like, there's only so many times you can kind of ride that roller coaster. And psychologically, it's really hard because you're just, right when you finally feel like, you're over the hump and things are clicking, something happens and then you're kind of back where you started. And it's just like this beat down every single time. I think a lot of it was just my sheer belief in myself that I like had seen glimpses of what I could do. I kept going back to London of like, if I could do that in the condition that I was in, like, what can I do healthy? Like, I'm not ready to like throw in the towel and give up. There has to be just a different way for me to do it. But I need someone that backs me in that. And I need someone that will believe in me and will give me that permission essentially to do that. And so that's what I eventually found with Joe, which really helped. But just trying to do that time and time again by myself was getting like really hard. And I was getting to a point where I was like, I don't know that I can do this for like another Olympic cycle. If I can't figure out how to keep myself healthy, how many times can you do it? Like, we're all human. You can only go through that cycle so many times before you're like, it's getting too hard. Like, and I'm not enjoying it anymore. It's taking the passion and the love that I do have for this sport away. And so that was something that I was like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm falling into that space. I don't want to be in that space. Like, I either have to make a change and see what happens, or I do need to take a step back from the sport and maybe like, so I did have that moment where it was like, I'm either going to decide to kind of be done, or I'm going to give it another go, but it has to be different. Like, you can't keep beating your head against the wall, doing the same things, and expect different results. So that's kind of where I got. And then it was just finding someone that could support you in that.
It's so interesting, right? Like, you get to that point where you're almost like prepared to walk away, but then you're like, okay, now that almost like gave you the confidence to like try it a different way,
I knew deep down I didn't want to walk away. And I love this sport, and I knew I would regret it, but I was like, you have to be brave and make a change, take a risk, and do something different. Otherwise it's going to be the same. That's right. It really gave me that. And again, it like really empowered me to do that, where otherwise I don't know that I would have done that.
Yeah. It's so challenging, that idea that if you want something to be different, you have to do something different, but trusting that.
Oh, it's so hard.
Very challenging. Yes, exactly.
And especially as like athletes, like I hate change. I don't like change. I'm a creature of habit. I like a routine. I like to kind of like control what all the things I like to believe I can control. And so making a big change is really scary. And I think we all can relate to that. Like, change, if it's in your job, if it's in your personal life, if it's whatever, it's hard. It's hard to trust that that's the right thing. But it's just like deep down, it's like, you always know that it, like, if it is, but trusting that enough to do it. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's still so hard.
I think part of it too is like the brain humans don't like the unknown, right? Our brains don't like the unknown. And so sometimes when we don't know, there is no guaranteed outcome, right? There's an unknown factor. The brain takes that as a signal of potential danger. And because of that, if we can't override that, it really, like, I was going to say inability, but it's not even inability, that like not being the unwillingness to take the risk holds a lot of athletes back from actually knowing what they're truly capable of. And it's like, it's such a shame, but it's like such a normal human psychological experience.
Well, and I think that was the thing too, where I was like, for so long, it's like, I was blaming all these external things and like my coach and like whatever. And like, those are all different pieces. But like, when it really like boiled down to is it's like, I was getting in the way almost. And so it's like acknowledging that and that unwillingness and then being like, okay, I do have control here. I do have that power. What am I going to do about it? So it's like, you know, it's easier to just be like, oh, like it's the training, it's the coach, it's the environment, it's this or that. And sometimes all of that is true, right? In ways it was.
That's right.
But it's like, okay, if that's how you feel, then it's like, but now you're the only one that's kind of in the way of getting the change that you want and having the outcomes that you want. So challenging yourself to like finally do that. And not just like blame all these other things and be like, that's why it didn't work out, you know? So once I got to that point, I was like, okay, I think it can work out. And I don't think that I'm done with my career, but I actually have to do something about it. No one else is going to do it for me. And it's time to just like move forward. But I think that can be really hard because you have to get vulnerable with yourself and be like, wait, maybe I'm also part of the problem. And it's not just like all these external things that I want to blame it on. It's also coming from me and I have to be willing to like do something about it and like take accountability for it.
Yeah. And then you have to have some hard conversations with people who are close to you, you know, like, which I imagine is not easy, right? Yeah.
No, those are the hardest ones.
Yeah. Where even if you're like, the situation isn't ideal, you work with a coach for a long time, you have a good relationship, you know, it's hard to tell someone I'm moving on.
Totally. So hard. And you feel like you can't do that, but it's like, again, you don't get to do this forever. It's like a small window of time. So you have to like maximize and take advantage of it. So when you start to feel all of that internally, like that's always kind of how you know, like, all right, I got to either take a step back or I got to just trust myself and do the hard thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we know that you went on then in 2020 to come in 5th in the Olympic marathon trials. That was a fantastic result. And you did continue to run for another Olympic cycle after that.
Yeah.
Through last year, where I know 2024 didn't necessarily go the way you might have hoped. I know you dropped out of the Olympic marathon trials not knowing you had COVID, which I feel like is just a common experience for many people.
Yes, we could all relate to that. Yeah.
And then, you know, we mentioned earlier you were going to run Chicago again last year and you didn't. And that all sounds like a really hard year. I know we're kind of skipping a period of time. But I'm wondering about that year, what that emotional impact of all those experiences and like kind of how you then did decide that it might be time to enter the next phase.
Yeah, last year was hard. I mean, honestly, the last 3 years were challenging. I just wasn't quite running the way that I wanted to run. I wasn't having the race results that I thought I would be having or wanted to have. I was just kind of like, I was like in a rut with my running, but it wasn't clear to me like what that next move was. Mm-hmm. And so entering into 2024, I obviously wanted to give the trials one more go. Mm-hmm. And then when that went the way that it went, you know, I still had another year. I wanted to, you know, try and rebound for a fall marathon and kind of have that be the indicator as far as like, does it make sense to keep going and like pursuing another contract for another cycle or another year or two? Mm-hmm. Or does it like maybe not? I think I was wrestling with the transition for like 2 years, but it's a really scary thing. And that first year, I just didn't want to admit that that's kind of where I was, because you have to give so much of yourself to do this sport at the level that, you know, you're trying to do it as an elite athlete. And so I just felt like that was like doubt or like me not believing in myself or whatever the case may be. So I kept kind of like pushing that down. But then after the trials happened and then I really tried to regroup, I just focused on like a quieter summer of like local races. I was having fun with the training group that I was in, just trying to kind of get some of that joy back in the process of running. I felt like I was doing that, which was a good sign. So I decided Chicago is where I wanted to go. I wanted to try and PR. I really wanted to run under 225 before I retired. I felt like I could do that. I just wasn't doing it. So it just seemed like that was a good last push to kind of then reevaluate. So after Chicago, I was going to do that anyway. Then I got the Achilles. Funny how life works. The same kind of thing. This bursa on my Achilles flared up again. Just really painful. Tried to cross train. Tried to do all the things I mentioned earlier, but I'm now older and I have learned from all of that. And so, you get to the week of the race, you're kind of running, but you're kind of not. The last month has not been great training, which in a marathon block, you need you don't want an entire 4-week taper. It's too long. And especially with where the sport is now and what I was trying to run, I was just I have a huge hole in my fitness. What is realistic at Chicago now? The race week rolled around. I still wasn't fully able to run more than 30 minutes without pain. Old me would have done what I did in 2018. So I was like, Laura, you've been here before. It's really unfortunate that you're here again. What did you learn though? And so I talked with my coach, and cause we were kind of well, is it worth it? And everyone gives you different advice. Your agents are well, you should go and start the race and get half of your appearance fee, financial reasons, right? Especially if this is kind of the last one and your contract's up in December, maybe you should just go and see what happens. Your coach obviously wants you to do the best thing for you, but he was kind of yeah, maybe we go and we just feel it out, see each day, if it gets better, we just change the race plan. But I was one, I don't want to change the race plan. This is, I either want to go and be 100% to go full send and try and run 223, or if that's not going to happen now because of this injury and the fact that I still can't put together more than 30 minutes of running, it just doesn't make sense. And I was just for me, also, I really, respect the relationships I have with race directors. And so it didn't, and everyone makes these decisions for themselves. But for me, I was just if I know that I can't finish this race, which at this point I was I can't run 26 miles, even if I run 3 hours, I can't run. My Achilles isn't going to let me. It felt really dishonest to Tracy, who I have a great relationship with at Chicago and has been so good to me over my career. So I was I'm going to pull out. I'm not going to go. It's just the right decision for my health, and just all the other reasons. I can't do it the way I want to do it. And I don't want to blow up my leg even more. At that point, I was maybe if I do the right thing, pull out, try and let this recover, I can push for CIM. It wasn't fully over for me, but that was really hard. And I think after Chicago, that's when I knew. I was I've given everything I can give. I have nothing left to give this sport at this level. I don't want to be done. This, as athletes, we all want to go out on our terms and ride off into the sunset, win a major marathon, win an Olympic medal, and then be okay, now I'm just done. Right. That's not often how it works for anyone. You have to make that decision usually before you're ready. So it was really hard because I was just this isn't how I want to end my career. But I was I know that I've given these last 13 years everything I possibly can. And I'm really proud of what I've done. I'm terrified because I don't know what the next chapter holds. I don't know how to transition. I've run for 13 years. I felt in that moment, I couldn't do anything else. So it's a really scary thing. I knew my contract was ending. Saucony was so incredibly good to me. They stood by me for 10 years. I knew they weren't going to renew me. And I was I can keep running. I don't have to have a contract to keep racing if that's what I want to do. But the more I thought about it, I was I don't think that's what I want to do. But it's a scary thing to admit to yourself, because then you're well, if I don't want to do that and I don't want to keep training and keep trying to run and try and get another contract, what am I going to do?
Now what?
So it was just so incredibly terrifying. But by December of last year, I was very much at peace with it. I was terrified. And all my friends and family will tell you I was not handling it incredibly well. But deep down, I knew that I was ready to retire from this part of my running career. So I was at peace with that. But then it's just everything that comes after, where you're oh my God, I don't know what. Exactly. I was I have no idea. So it was a journey. But again, I think the injury before Chicago, I'm grateful for it now, because I think had I not had that and I pushed through another marathon, even if it didn't go great, I think I would have maybe just kind of tried to keep going, even if it was just another year, another 6 months. Whereas like the injury and dropping out of Chicago was so much more final. And I just felt like it was my body's way almost of being like, we're done. Like trying to keep pushing things at this level. And it helped kind of give me that clarity to take that step back and be honest with myself about where I was truly at in the sport.
Yeah. Well, now we know what's next. You're coaching an athletics coach, which is incredible because we just have so few female coaches and pro groups, and it's a fantastic group of athletes. But tell us a little bit about how that came about, first of all, because I think it's very interesting, and then how you think your injury experiences are helping you now as you guide these athletes.
Yeah, it was really cool. I decided one day randomly as I was applying for jobs, I actually had a job interview the day that I decided to go onto Instagram and post about transitioning. I just I basically just said, I'm looking to step into a new chapter of my life, not sure what it looks like, not sure where running is going to fit into that, but like I'm in this transition. And it was like maybe a day later, Dathan texted me. And Dathan and I almost worked together, like he was going to coach me back in 2018 when I was like making all of these big changes, and ultimately ended up joining Joe, but we just had always stayed in touch. And so he reached out and was like, hey, I saw your transitioning. Like, what does that mean? And I was like, honestly, I have no idea. But I think I'm trying, like, I think I'm retiring from elite competition, and I'm just trying to kind of figure out like, what do I do now? And he was like, okay, well, I might have an opportunity for you. Like, do you want to come in and chat? And I was like, very intrigued. Yes. So I went in, I met with him and Kelsey. He basically told me they're looking to expand OAC. They want to really start to develop a marathon side of the team around Helen. And he was like, the team's already pretty big. I can only do so much. Track season and marathon season are like very different. It requires different things, different times of the year, different racing and training. Kelsey has decided she wants to stay on the track side of things as that is her background. So I need help in starting this road group and then coaching those athletes. Are you interested, basically? So I did a couple rounds of interviews with various people at On. And then like a week later, this all happened very fast, like 4 or 5 days. And then a week later, Dathan offered me the job. And it was pretty incredible. I was like, holy shit, is this really happening? And again, like it happened so fast. And then like you're still trying to process your own transition. The fact that you were an athlete like less than 2 months ago. Now I'm about to step into this team with some of the best athletes in the world. What could I possibly offer them? And I competed against some of them, Helen included. I raced like 2 marathons against Helen. So it was just like this surreal moment of like, I knew I wanted to coach if I could find the right opportunity, because I had loved the 13 years I spent as a high school coach. This was a monster opportunity, but again, very intimidating. And you're kind of like, am I ready to do this?
When that transition was so quick from like,
it was quick.
What am I going to do to what am I doing? Like, just, that's amazing. Yeah. Do you feel like your experience, like with the coaching that you've done, do you feel like the experiences that you've had with your injuries has changed you as a coach at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think having that experience and being able to draw on that, I mean, you're working with, like I said, some of the best in the world. And there's a very, like, obviously OAC operates under Dathan's philosophy and his training structure, which has proven to be incredibly successful. But within that, everyone is still very different in what their needs are, where the focus needs to be, how they psychologically come up and go into these workouts, what they take away from the workouts, where things sometimes do need to be tweaked with training because of how they're feeling, because of something that's flaring up that we want to make sure we get ahead of. So having the experience on the athlete side of things, I think is really helpful in just hopefully helping them feel like they have a space where they can communicate when things aren't going well, whether it's psychological or physical, because we can only be the best coaches we can be if we have all of the information and they feel like they have a safe space to really be honest and upfront about this. I think worked really well. This didn't as much. This is how I felt after. This is how I'm still feeling, whatever the case may be, because that was one of the things I learned as an athlete and I spoke on is struggling to communicate that and not always feeling like I had the right environment to be honest. And especially at this elite level, it's like, yeah, they're all adults and everyone's like, well, you should kind of like know that by now. But it's like, you're in this really high pressure, like cooker environment. You have, you know, everything as far as how you make your living is on the line with how you perform. It's really easy to get caught up in that and still kind of be like, I feel fine, I feel fine, I feel fine, and keep doing the same thing over and over. And it's not working, whatever that is. And so making sure that they feel like they can always have that line of communication and we can have those conversations after training, I think is a really important piece of what I do and what I hope I can continue to do for them, and just building those relationships where they feel like they have that trust with you. But that takes time. So, you know, my first couple months, you're like, we are just slowly chipping away, just trying to kind of like build those relationships with each athlete, but especially with like my road group, like Helen and Joe and Ryan. And then we just recently signed Patrick Kiprop. So I'm still like, you know, getting to know him, but having those relationships with them where they feel like we can really just have the conversations we need to have to guide training the way that we need to do it and be successful is just so important. So that's what I've really tried to focus on these first few months.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And just for the non-running nerds here, we'll just say quickly that Dathan is Dathan Ritzenhein, who is also an Olympian and a head coach at OAC now. And you mentioned Joe Klecker, and I know, he's one of the road athletes on your team, just made a great debut in the New York City Marathon. And I know he was injured much of last year, missed the Olympic trials. And I'm sure that even though, like you said, you were newer to the team, I'm sure you were able to help him with that confidence piece, or just him knowing that you had those experiences. Like, I'm sure it was a valuable connection, even though you were still, like, as you mentioned, building that relationship, right?
Yeah, I think that really helped with Joe is just having that relatability. And when the door was open for us to really talk about that, whether it was the injury, whether it was, you know, just him making his transition from the track to the roads and the expectation that surrounded that for him and how he had to navigate and really deal with that while coming off of this injury and the time that he missed. I think that was like a really important piece to how he and I started to connect. And again, I used that to really just make him start to hopefully feel like he had that space with me to be really upfront and honest with how he was feeling, whether it's physically or just like, again, the psychological component of everything he was trying to navigate last year leading into the marathon and what was expected, and just kind of like being that space for him. And it was really cool because I debuted in New York. I remember what making that transition was like. I remember how different marathon training was from what I had been doing, even with cross country and on the track. He was experiencing that himself. And there's doubt that comes with that because suddenly you're in this arena of the sport that's so very different and you feel very different and you don't feel the way like you used to feel. And you start to panic thinking like it's not working. But Dathan and I were like, it is going to work. You just have to trust the process and really, really trust us when we tell you it is not going, you cannot compare it to how you felt on the track. The workouts are going to be different. The volume is different. The fatigue is different. And you're supposed to be tired. I told Joe, I was like, you're supposed to feel like shit for like 8 weeks. Like that means that we're doing it correctly, obviously within reason. We don't want that to get too crazy. Like there's bounds to the fatigue, but like just really like helping him navigate that transition because it's really hard. Even as someone as successful as Joe, who did incredible things on the track. I think Joe did things on the track people didn't think Joe was going to do on the track. And he stayed on the track longer because he was so successful. I just like, it was just, I think really, I was just hoping to, again, kind of like help him navigate that space and start this new chapter in his running career, which I think he's going to be incredibly successful at. And I'm really excited for him. But yeah, it's a hard space to navigate. It's not easy. And some people really struggle and don't ultimately end up doing that well. And I didn't want that to happen to Joe. And it didn't. And now he's really got an understanding of what it's all about. But when you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't have people that know, that can kind of give you that guidance and give you something to trust in, that's where it gets really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That trust is huge because like when you're going through that particular transition and it feels different than everything you know, everything in you is screaming, this is wrong. This doesn't feel right. Yeah. I'm going to do my own training through this entire
Totally. Oh you have that panic of like, this can't be it. And you're like, no, it is. Like, I promise. But yeah, if you don't have someone reassuring you, then I mean, how you wouldn't know, right? You would definitely like want to like pull the pin and just pivot and go back to what you do know, which doesn't always work if you're trying to switch up and change into these new chapters and events. You have to be willing to adapt and change, but that's so hard. And so I think as coaches, especially at this level, that's a huge piece of what you're doing for these athletes.
Yes. And to recognize that and honor that as part of the process it's going to take you very far as a coach, in addition to as an athlete, like to understand that those psychological dynamics and that they're going to affect your athlete, you got to address them. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, maybe that's part of the answer to this next question too. But Laura, looking back at all of this and thinking about it, how would you say that your experiences with injury changed you as an athlete and a coach and a person?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think injuries really can be a blessing in disguise because they force you to stop, reset, and change the way you're looking at things. And maybe it's just little tweaks that need to happen. It's not these like monumental, like big, crazy changes that like I made at various points after injuries in my career, but sometimes it is. And like I said, with osteitis, I really do think that injury allowed me to go on and do another 5 years of my running career because I was forced to address things that I never would have addressed had I not had a massive injury that made me address them. And then just psychologically, what you learn coming off of injuries or setbacks and how you navigate them, how you lean into the people around you, how you find that perspective, how you keep that belief in yourself and keep putting one foot in front of the other, even if that's all you can do for days on end. You just keep showing up for yourself, even if it's in really little ways. I wouldn't have figured all of that out without injuries. And truthfully, the injuries that I had in my career in running, what I learned from those, I took on and used in other parts of my life to stand up for myself, to use my voice, to feel empowered. A lot of that came from running and a lot of that came from the setbacks I had with running. But yeah, I just think at the end of the day, injuries give you a lot of perspective. They offer you time for reflection. They do make you stronger if you let them and you're willing to be patient and do things the way they need to be done to be healthy. I think they do really like serve a purpose, and I'm very grateful. Like I don't have any regrets with any of the injuries that I had. They were heartbreaking and they were hard to get through. And yeah, they come with all of those other emotions, but they made me who I am. And I learned so much. And now I'm hoping that all of that experience from like the great pieces of my career and the really, really hard parts of my career are going to make me a really great coach to help this next generation of athletes hopefully maximize everything that they have in their careers. So I wouldn't be here. Like if I didn't have that injury before Chicago, I honestly don't know that I would have stopped, as I said, and I wouldn't be sitting here having spent the last 8 months coaching with the On Athletics Club and working with athletes like Helen O'Beary. Like it's just like I'll share this really quickly. I was telling my boyfriend this after New York this year, or actually while I was in New York this year. A year ago, I went to New York for the marathon to do commentating. I did the iHeartRadio broadcast, and I was after I dropped out of Chicago. I was trying to kind of keep running and like thinking maybe I could push for CIM. I remember like limping my way around Central Park, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is so crazy. But I leaned into the experience, did the broadcasting. I was like, again, maybe this kind of like, you know, it kind of opened my eyes to what might lie beyond my running. But this year, I'm fast forward a year later, I'm in Central Park running with Helen O'Beary, doing her pre-race shakeout, and we're just, rolling around Central Park, and I'm just like here, like on the other side of the sport, having made this transition and having kind of gone through all of that. But it's like, I wouldn't be here doing that with her, supporting her and Joe, if it weren't for everything I went through with Chicago and the injury, going to New York last year, doing the broadcasting, finally being willing to open myself up to life beyond the sport. And then a year later, here I am back at one of my favorite marathons with the one who won. It was just like so surreal. It was wild. It's a crazy reflection moment. So yeah, I don't regret anything. It all worked out the way it's meant to. And I know people say that, and like when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, I know. But it is very true. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for it all.
Well, Laura, we can't thank you enough for sharing all of that. And yeah, we have an interesting perspective, or we have a certain feeling when people say everything happens for a reason. And I don't know that that's always the case, or that the reason was evident from the beginning, but it's so much about what the meaning that you make out of it. And you have made such a beautiful meaning of your story. And we just really appreciate you sharing all of it with us. So thank you, Laura, so much for being here today. And we can't wait to keep tabs on what you and all of the OAC athletes do for now and for years forward. So thanks again so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Thanks again to Laura for joining us, and thanks to our sponsor, Lever Movement, for making this season possible. And as always, so much gratitude to Jeremy Nestle for editing this and every single episode in the first 8 and now into the 9th season of the Injured Athletes Club podcast. We're so grateful for you, Jeremy. We appreciate you. We also want to let you know that in the off season, we added a few more exciting pieces of merch to our gear store. You can get to that by heading to injuredathletesclub.com/shop. You're going to find now some fanny packs, some backpacks, some new colors of our t-shirts and hoodies, and so much gear there for you. It's perfect for you if you're going through your own recovery journey, want to give yourself a little bit of a pick-me-up. Perfect gift for the injured athlete in your life. We have some gear with our logo, the Injured Athletes Club, to show everyone your membership in the best club you never wanted to join. And we have other pieces of gear with some of Coach Carey's best sayings, including obstacles to opportunities. I'm actually wearing my obstacles to opportunities hoodie right now. And don't forget, between episodes, you can join our Facebook support group, which is also called the Injured Athletes Club. There, you'll find support and advice from other people who just get it. You can get links to that too on our website, and also links to so many other resources to help you along your recovery journey. That website, again, is injuredathletesclub.com. We'll see you there.